I still remember the sound of the cork popping that morning. Not from celebration, but from nerves. My brother Adrian had ordered an expensive vintage opened in the boardroom. As if this meeting was already his coronation. I knew then, before a single word was spoken, that my place in our family winery was about to be erased. "Let's get straight to the point," Adrian said, swirling the deep red in his glass like a man rehearsing victory. "It's time for new leadership. The board and father agree. Elena, your role as managing director is no longer required." The words struck harder than the oak table between us. For 15 years, I had poured my soul into Riversong Estate Winery. The rows of vines I had pruned in winter, the fermenting barrels I had watched like children, the contracts I had secured with restaurants and distributors across the country, all dismissed with one sweeping sentence. I forced myself to breathe evenly. Around the table, the board members shifted. Some uncomfortable, others already aligned with Adrian's charm. My father, seated at the head, didn't meet my eyes. He just nodded faintly, his expression carved from stone. So this was it. After decades of loyalty, I was being cast out. By the very blood that bound me to this land. I leaned forward, my voice steady though my chest burned. "Is that all?" "Yes, Elena," Adrian said smoothly, the corners of his mouth tugging in satisfaction. "That will be all." I gathered my leather-bound notebook, and the fountain pen my grandmother had given me, the one I had used to sign our first major distribution deal. I nodded once to the board, stood, and walked out. My heels echoed against the tiled floor, each step measured, deliberate, refusing to show the earthquake tearing through me. The heavy boardroom door shut behind me, with a click so soft it felt mocking. My world had just collapsed. Yet the sound was barely louder than a whisper. When I stepped outside, the Tennessee sun stretched across the vineyards in golden sheets. Rows upon rows of grapes shimmered, heavy with promise, uncaring of human betrayals. For a moment I hated them, those vines I had nurtured like children, those silent witnesses to my downfall. "Elena?" My assistant Clara rushed after me, her face pale. "What happened in there?" I swallowed hard. Adrian happened. Father happened. They pushed me out. Her mouth fell open. "They can't." "They can," I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. Then softer. And they did. For a moment, Clara just stood there, hurt and furious on my behalf. "You built this place. Without you, without me, it will still stand," I said, though even I didn't believe it. "I should tell you something now, before this story unfolds further. My name is Elena Rivers, and this is not just a tale of family betrayal. It's the story of how the brother who thought he'd buried me gave me the seeds to grow an empire of my own. You're watching Revenge Repaid, where betrayals don't just sting. They build the fire of retribution. If you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe. These stories of downfall and redemption, of heartbreak turned into triumph, deserve to be heard. And trust me, you won't want to miss how this one ends. Now back to that boardroom betrayal. When I returned to my office, a corner room I had earned, not inherited, I let the weight of the moment crush me. The mahogany desk still smelled faintly of the wine I had spilled on it during a late night 2 years ago, drafting our biggest export proposal. The framed photograph of me with grandmother, hands stained from harvest, seemed almost to mock me now. Adrian's words repeated in my head. "Your role is no longer required." The truth was simpler. I was no longer required because I had always been a threat. Adrian had been the golden child from the start. Handsome, smooth-talking, adored at galas and country clubs. He knew how to charm investors with tailored suits and an easy smile. But charm doesn't keep vines alive during frost. Charm doesn't negotiate shipping delays. Charm doesn't win the trust of sommeliers in New York, who only care about quality. That had been my role. The silent workhorse. The shadow. And yet Father had always favored him. "You need to let Adrian lead," he would tell me. "He has the charisma to carry our name forward." Charisma. That word became the hammer that drove nails into my career. But what they never understood was this. Vines don't care about charisma. Grapes don't care about charm. And neither eventually would the customers. I sat in my chair, my hands trembling for the first time in years. Not from fear, though yes, there was fear, but from anger so sharp it tasted metallic on my tongue. Then slowly the tremor eased. A strange calm began to settle, as if the storm inside me had shifted direction. Adrian thought he had won. Father thought he had silenced me. But in the depths of my drawer lay something neither of them remembered. A document my grandmother had signed over to me before she died. A legal deed granting me exclusive rights to cultivate and distribute The midnight harvest, a rare grape variety she had developed in secret. They had cast me out, but they had also freed me. The deed to the midnight harvest grape sat heavy in my hands that night, as though grandmother herself were pressing it into my palm. I could still hear her voice, soft and firm, as she guided my hands along the vines when I was a child. These grapes are stubborn, Elena, like you. They need someone who won't give up on them. I had been 12 then, clumsy, overlooked, while Adrian basked in the praise of being father's heir. But grandmother had seen what no one else did, that patience and grit can outlast charisma. She named the grape herself. Its skin held a dusky sheen, nearly black in the moonlight. Few had tasted its wine, but those who had whispered about its complexity, its depth. Now it would be my weapon. The next morning, I drove past the familiar stone gates of Riversong Estate. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. On the hill, I saw Adrian giving a tour to investors, gesturing grandly, smiling wide. The staff trailed behind him, polite but uneasy. They knew who had really kept the winery afloat all those years. Clara, sitting beside me, muttered, "He's parading like a king, and the throne isn't even warm yet." I didn't reply. My focus was elsewhere, on the small parcel of land grandmother had left me, just beyond the river bend, untouched, overlooked, forgotten, except by me. That land would become my sanctuary, my battlefield, my future. Of course, beginnings are never easy. The banks laughed when I requested financing. "You've just been pushed out of Riversong," one manager said, her voice smooth with false sympathy. "That kind of instability makes you a risk." Suppliers hesitated too. "Your brother controls most of the contracts in this county," they told me. "We can't jeopardize our ties with him. Even workers I had trained avoided me. We're loyal to you, Elena. But we have families," one whispered, eyes downcast. "If Adrian finds out we're helping you," his voice trailed off. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. But sometimes, solitude is the soil where determination takes root. I spent my days walking the overgrown parcel of land, studying its soil, its slope, its drainage. At night, I spread maps and budgets across my kitchen table, marking what could be sold, what could be built, what could be sacrificed. I sold my car for seed money. I mortgaged my home. Every coin I could scrape together went into resurrecting grandmother's secret. Clara stayed by my side, fiercely loyal. "I'd rather fight beside you in a field," she said one night, than polish glasses for Adrian in that marble tasting room. And then there was Raphael. He had been Riversong's vineyard manager, before Adrian decided his methods were too old-fashioned. I found him tending his own small plot, his hands still as steady as when he'd taught me to prune. "I can't pay you much," I admitted, heart pounding with the shame of asking. He studied me for a long time, then said, "Your grandmother once told me you'd change this land, Elena. I'll work for you. Pay me when the harvest pays you." That night I cried, not from despair, but from gratitude. My army was small, but it was real. Word of my project spread slowly, like smoke through the vines. Adrian, of course, heard first. His call came sharp and smug. "You're embarrassing yourself, Elena. Playing farmer on a forgotten patch of dirt? Do yourself a favor. Take what father gave you and disappear quietly." I let him speak. Let him believe his words held power. Then I simply said, "We'll see whose name is remembered when the next harvest comes." His laughter echoed down the line, but it didn't rattle me. If anything, it fueled me. The months blurred into blistered hands, sleepless nights, and the quiet hum of possibility. Where Riversong hosted glittering galas, I hosted long days under the sun, planning the midnight harvest cuttings with reverence. Where Adrian hired PR firms, I poured every drop of sweat into nurturing vines that carried grandmother's legacy. I kept a single bottle of her last vintage on my nightstand, unopened. It was my reminder, my lighthouse on nights when doubt swelled like a storm tide. Still, doubt crept in. Bills piled higher than barrels. Machinery broke. I woke in cold sweats, wondering if Adrian was right. That I was building castles in sand. And yet, every morning, when the dawn light stretched across the young vines, something inside me whispered, "Grow, endure, wait." The turning point came unexpectedly, in the form of a stranger at my half-built tasting shed. He was tall, with a silver beard and a notebook under his arm. "Elena Rivers?" he asked. "Yes. My name is Malcolm Price. I'm a wine critic." The name struck me. Price's reviews were notorious, capable of destroying or elevating a label overnight. He smiled faintly. "I heard a rumor you were resurrecting the midnight harvest. I came to see if it's true. My throat went dry. The vines were still too young for harvest. I couldn't offer him more than cuttings, leaves, and the promise of what was to come. But I showed him everything. The soil, the slope, the water, the trellises Raphael had built by hand. He walked in silence, taking notes. Finally, he looked at me. If these grapes grow as your grandmother intended, Elena, you won't just rival River Song, you'll eclipse it. And then he left, as quietly as he came. That night, Clara poured me a glass of cheap store wine, our celebration drink, and raised it with a grin. To beginnings, she said. I clinked her glass. No, I corrected softly, staring out the window toward the dark silhouette of my vines. To revenge. Served in a bottle. The first harvest of the midnight harvest grapes came 2 years later. In a dawn so cold my breath turned white against the vines. My hands shook as I plucked the first cluster, the dusky purple skin shimmering like polished obsidian. Around me, Clara and Raphael worked in silence, reverent as though we were lifting relics from sacred ground. By nightfall the barrels were filled. The scent of fermentation rose rich and heady, alive with promise. For weeks I hovered over the tanks, tasting, adjusting, praying. This was more than wine. It was vindication in liquid form. When the first bottles rolled off the line, I held one close, tracing the label with trembling fingers. Luna Vinea, Vine of the Moon, a tribute to grandmother, to the midnight sheen of her creation, to the legacy Adrian had tried to bury. Our launch was modest, a small dinner at a Nashville restaurant, whose sommelier had once sworn loyalty to me. I poured samples with a steady hand, though my heart hammered in my chest. The first sip passed across Malcolm Price's lips. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then his eyes widened, and a slow smile curved across his face. This, he declared, raising the glass high, is extraordinary. The review he published 2 weeks later detonated like dynamite, a hauntingly complex wine with velvet tannins, rivaling Europe's best vintages, a triumph of patience and vision. Orders flooded in faster than we could pack them. Restaurants called. Distributors begged. Even international buyers reached across oceans for a taste. And with every sale, River Song's walls cracked. Adrian didn't take long to retaliate. First came the smear campaign. Whispered rumors that Luna Vinea was counterfeit, that I had stolen River Song's techniques. One evening, Clara stormed into my office with a newspaper. He called you a fraud in print. I scanned the article, Adrian's quotes dripping with contempt. My sister has always been reckless, always chasing shadows. River Song remains the true heart of Tennessee winemaking. I wanted to rage, but instead I laughed. Let him shout, I told Clara. Our bottles will speak louder. Next came the legal threats. His lawyers sent thick envelopes claiming infringement, demanding I cease production. My attorney, a sharp woman named Lydia, smirked as she flipped through the pages. Every claim is hollow. You own the midnight harvest rights fair and square. He's thrashing. Still, the attack stung. It wasn't just about business. It was my brother, the boy I once defended from bullies, now trying to crush me. The worst blow came from father himself. One afternoon, he arrived at my modest winery, his tailored suit far too clean for the dirt road he stood upon. His eyes swept the barrels, the workers, the humble tasting room. Elena, he said, his voice low but cutting, you're tearing this family apart. River Song is faltering. Your brother is drowning. End this nonsense before you ruin us all. I met his gaze, my hand steady on the table between us. You gave him the crown, father. I gave myself a kingdom. Don't mistake my survival for sabotage. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. When he left, I felt the final thread snap. I'd lost his love long ago. Now I no longer craved it. And then the moment came, when revenge stopped being theory and became undeniable reality. The Southern Heritage Wine Competition was the crown jewel of our region. Every year, River Song had dominated it, basking in trophies that lined their marble halls. Adrian entered, of course, strutting with his flagship Cabernet. I entered Luna Vinea, my hands trembling only as I sealed the entry form. The night of the awards. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gowns, the air sharp with ego and perfume. Adrian spotted me across the room, smirked and lifted his glass in mock salute. When the final category was announced, Best Red Wine of the Year, the crowd hushed. And the winner is... The envelope tore. Luna Vinea by Elena Rivers. For a heartbeat, silence. Then thunderous applause erupted, crashing like waves against marble. Cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed. Adrian's smirk shattered into stone. As I walked onto the stage, the trophy cold in my hands, I looked across the sea of faces and found his. His eyes burned with fury, with disbelief. I smiled. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, but with the quiet certainty of justice. That night, sales of Luna Vinea doubled again. Riversong's stock plummeted. Investors withdrew. Workers whispered of leaving. Adrian lashed out on every front, but his strikes hit empty air. I had what he could never fake: authenticity. And in the end, authenticity always wins. 6 months after Luna Vina's triumph, Riversong Estate stood like a wounded beast, still proud, but bleeding from 100 unseen cuts. Distributors had shifted allegiance. Restaurants swapped Riversong's glossy bottles for mine. Even former vineyard workers crossed the river to join me. Their loyalty bound not to the Riversong name, but to the soil, the vines, and to me, Adrian. Once the golden prince of Tennessee wine, was now a man cornered by his own arrogance. One evening, as the sun dipped low, a black sedan pulled into my gravel drive. Adrian stepped out, his suit immaculate as always, though his eyes carried a weariness I had never seen before. "Elena," he said simply. I folded my arms, bracing myself. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He glanced at the vines, the barrels stacked behind me. "You've done well, too well. Riversong is finished if this continues." "Finished?" I tilted my head. "No, Adrian. Riversong is finished, because you never knew how to nurture it. You thought charm could replace sweat. You thought father's approval was enough to make you a leader." His jaw tightened. "I came to propose a truce. Merge with Riversong. Save the family name." I almost laughed. A year ago, those words would have been everything I longed to hear. Now they sounded like chains. "No," I said firmly. "I didn't build Luna Vinea to crawl back. I built it to stand on its own, to prove I was never the shadow you tried to erase." His mask cracked then. For the first time, I saw not arrogance, but fear. "Father will never forgive you," he whispered. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I stopped needing his forgiveness the moment you fired me." He flinched as though I had struck him. Then he turned, climbed back into his car, and disappeared down the winding road. 2 weeks later, the announcement came. Riversong Estate was filing for bankruptcy protection. The local papers called it the fall of a dynasty. Investors wept. Loyalists shook their heads. And in the center of it all, Adrian stood alone, his empire reduced to ashes. I should have felt triumph, and I did. But beneath the sweetness of revenge lay something more complicated, a sadness, like watching an old tree fall, one you once loved, but could no longer save. Father called me soon after. His voice was frail, stripped of the authority it once carried. "Elena," he said, "I was wrong. About you, about Adrian, about everything." For a long moment I couldn't speak. His apology was a ghost I had stopped chasing years ago. "I never needed your approval," I said finally. "But I'm glad you finally see me." He sighed heavily. "Will you take Riversong under your wing? Save what remains?" I looked out the window at my vines, strong and thriving under the morning sun. "No, Father. Some legacies are meant to end. Riversong was yours. Luna Vinea is mine." The months that followed were a blur of expansion. New contracts, international awards, even whispers of exporting to Europe. My team grew. My tasting room overflowed with visitors. And every bottle sold carried not just wine, but a story. The story of betrayal. The story of resilience. The story of revenge turned into rebirth. Sometimes late at night, I walk the rows of vines under the moonlight, the fruit glistening like clusters of stars. I imagine grandmother's hand on my shoulder, her voice in my ear. "These grapes are stubborn, Elena, like you." She was right. Stubbornness had carried me through the storm. Adrian had sought to bury me, but in doing so, he planted the very seed of my empire. So, to those of you watching now, remember this. Betrayal is not the end of your story. It may be the spark that ignites it. This was my revenge repaid. Not in anger, not in ruin, but in the rise of something greater than what they tried to take from me. My name is Elena Rivers, once the forgotten daughter of Riversong Estate, now the founder of Luna Vinea. A name spoken not in shadows, but in the light of my own making. And when I lift a glass of midnight harvest beneath the stars, I know the sweetest wine I will ever taste is the one poured from my brother's defeat.